It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the St. Mary's Mount head women's bowling coach, Coach Kenneth Degraaf. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Brandon. How are you?
I'm doing good. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to get started in coaching college bowling?
Yeah, I bowled myself in college at a small school called Siena Heights in Michigan. And as my time was coming to an end there, I accepted a graduate assistant position at St. Francis University in Loretto, Pennsylvania, which is a member of the Northeast Conference. And then towards the end of my 2 years there, just as I was about to graduate with my MBA, the Mount St. Mary's announced that they were adding a women's bowling program. And it was just the right opportunity at the right time. I found out during my time at SFU that I enjoyed coaching women's bowling more than I realized, giving back to the game that I love. And Mount St. Mary's gave me an interesting opportunity to start a program from scratch from day one and kind of establish that culture that I wanted a college bowling team to have and recruit a class of all freshmen in year one. So that's kind of how I got to be here.
What was it like, obviously, during your college time of bowling?
During my time, defense bowling, you have to go usually to the NAIA, which is kind of like NCAA junior, if you will, but they're top notch for men's bowling. It was fun. It went by way too fast. It still feels like yesterday, but it was, going on almost 10 years ago now that I was bowling myself in college, and it was intense. I think a lot of people that don't know much about college bowling, I wouldn't picture it as your typical day at the bowling alley, just like maybe having a beer with friends or playing cards. I mean, competitive bowling is a whole nother animal. You start talking about oil patterns and different bowling balls that do different things. It's a very complex game. It's a very scientific game, and it's more of a mental test than maybe a physical test, but definitely don't undermine the physical test is there as well.
What were some of your biggest accomplishments during your college time bowling?
Well, I was bowling. I wasn't a part of a brand new program, but I think when I joined the Siena Heights team, they were only a third-year program. So similar to how we kind of started from ground up here, I was joining something pretty new at Siena Heights. So, my goal when I came into that school was just to help them make the postseason for the first time. And fortunately, I could say that my first year in college, I helped lead our team to, our first year making the postseason. And we were able to make it 3 out of the 4 years I was there. And I feel like each year the team just got a little better. I was able to win a couple individual titles, which were the first in school history. So that was awesome. I don't know. I kind of like the underdog story. There were opportunities for me to go to bigger schools that were more established that might have competed for national championships right away. But I just thought it was such a cool opportunity to help start something relatively new and be the reason why they got better. And I think maybe that's why I gravitated towards this job, because it's a very similar situation that I started something pretty new and, look where we are now, doing pretty well.
What was it like getting your first opportunity to become a coach at St. Francis as the assistant coach?
It was pretty cool. It was a lot to learn. I think, even as coaches, we're always learning. And the head coach at the time, Tom Falbo, who's now the head coach at Morgan State University, he's doing a great job over there. I was just a sponge soaking in all the knowledge I could from him. But, I brought my own little flavor to the team as well, per se. But I think when you're an assistant coach, you're just trying to learn as much as you can from the head coach until it's maybe your time to shine. And so I was just a sponge, but trying to help the team as much as possible. We had some good teams when I was at St. Francis. We were, I think we got to high as number 11 in the country, which is coincidentally where our bowling team here at the Mount is currently ranked. So it was an awesome experience, just giving back. And if I could be any reason why a young lady improves their game, helps me feel good about what I'm doing.
What were some of your accomplishments during your time as the assistant coach for St. Francis?
At St. Francis, like I said, we got ranked to as high as number 11. There were quite a few tournaments we won. I remember us winning our Red Flash Invitational. I remember one weekend, and specifically, maybe the weekend that maybe wanted to get into head coaching, is we had a very unfortunate situation, a personal reason why our head coach couldn't make it to a tournament. So I had to be interim head coach for the weekend, and I was at the James Brown Invite. That's probably back in 2017, and we were actually fortunate enough to win that weekend and have an 11-1 record. And so I think that was kind of my first time being tested as a head coach, and I actually really enjoyed that challenge. That that pressure and that experience, and that probably gauged my interest more to become a head coach at Mount St. Mary's. So we accomplished a lot. We made postseasons. I actually had to leave St. Francis halfway through my second year there to accept this job. But even after I left, I would drive to all their tournaments and support them, and they were actually able to make the NCAA's in what was half of my last year. So they accomplished a lot while I was there, and it was a great experience, both as a coach, but also as a grad student.
What was that feeling like when you became the head coach for the first time in your coaching career and going to Mount St. Mary's?
Yeah, I was honored because I knew I had enough confidence that I felt I was qualified for the job. Mount St. Mary's, the Mount St. Mary's is actually leaving the NEC to the MAAC next year. That just came out yesterday. But up until today, we're an NEC school, and St. Francis was an NEC school, so the transition was fairly easy for me. Honestly, the biggest reason why I didn't know if I was going to get the job or not was because of how young I was at the time. When I got this job offered to me, I think I was 23 years old. And so, you're talking about 1 year older than some of the seniors at the school. And I'm finally getting to the point where I'm not confused as a student anymore. So I guess coaching has aged me in my 4 years here. But when I first came here, everyone just thought I was a student because I was that young. And so I was honored that the Mount, took a chance on me as such a young coach, because I know for sure at the time I was the youngest coach in the whole entire country for college bowling, but probably one of the youngest head coaches in the country for Division I sports in general. And so I just felt like I was trusted. I was given trust as a young coach to, and I still am a young coach to, come in and make a difference. And that trust meant a lot to me that Mount St. Mary's gave me. And I remember I told myself once they did offer me the job, is like, I'm not going to let them regret this. Like, I'm going to make sure that they felt they made the right decision. And hopefully, we've done some great things here. Hopefully we made they've done proud, and they don't regret their decision.
Of course, what was that transition like? As you said, you are a young coach, and some of the people are still the same age as you.
Yeah, well, what was nice about this job when I took it over was it was a first-year program. So even though I was 23 at the time, I didn't have to have any seniors on the team. I didn't have to have any juniors on the team. I didn't have to have any sophomores on the team. We recruited 8 freshmen out of the gate. Now, I got the job at 23. I got the job in January of 2018. My birthday was in May. So by the time the girls actually got to campus, I was 24 now, and they were 18 or 17 just out of high school. So that was another reason why I think this job appealed to me more than maybe, staying at St. Francis or going to another school, because I knew that there was going to be, it's probably the only school I could have gone to be a head coach, to have kind of that bigger age gap. Whereas, at St. Francis, it's fun to be a grad assistant, but the biggest challenge of a grad assistant is sometimes people try to see you as more of their friends, because, you're only a year older than me. And you always have to draw that line, right? But I think because I did take over a team that was brand new and it was all freshmen, it kind of helped me establish a little bit bigger of an age barrier where I kind of had that respect from day one. So I really appreciate that inaugural class, which are now my seniors, for coming in and respecting me, even though I was a younger head coach. But I do think having that age gap with a first-year team probably helped me out tremendously.
What was that 2019-2020 season like, being electrified and obviously having a winning season?
Yeah, 2018-19 was our first year, and that was a great season. 2019-20, of course, that was the COVID year per se. That was we didn't start the year the best. We shocked a lot of people our first year. In 2018-19, we had all freshmen. We won our first ever tournament with all freshmen as a first year's program. One of the coolest things I've ever seen. And we ended up that year number 19 in the country. And so we set the bar really high for a first year team. And then in 2019-20, sometimes you have to be humbled a little bit, and I think that we were so good our first year, and you can't just expect that you're going to sustain that. You have to keep working to stay good. So I think maybe we got a little complacent in that first semester, and we had to kind of, eat the humble pie, as they say. But once we realized, okay, and it was also a combination of that, but also now every team knows we're good. So people are taking us more seriously. I bet we won a lot of matches our first year because teams just didn't take us seriously because we were all freshmen, and then we beat them. But now in the second year, everyone knows who we are. They do take us seriously, and I think we kind of had to eat our pride a little bit that first semester. Had to go back to the drawing board, realized that we had to work a lot harder. Came back in the second semester swinging, though. We came out, I think our last 38 matches, we went 33-5, won 3 tournaments in a row. Going into the postseason, I remember we were actually driving to Philadelphia for a postseason tournament, and that's when I got a call from my athletic director that the pandemic was starting to get out of control and the season was over. So who knows what that year could have been, because that was probably the best 40 match stretch we've ever had in the history of Mount Bowling, going 33-5 over 38 games. So it was a tough way to end it, but I think electrified is a good word to use. I mean, they were electric. They were on fire as much as I've ever seen any team during that 3-4 tournament stretch that we had in 2019-20.
What was it like, obviously, going to the James Brown Invitational?
Yeah, so we've gone to that a few times. The first time we ever went, well, actually, we went 2018-19 with all freshmen, and we did awful. 2019-20, the James Brown Invite was one of the 3 tournaments we actually won during that stretch I just talked about, of 38-5 record, whatever, 33-5 record over 38 matches. And we actually, because of personal reason, had to do that without our best player at the time. So it was funny. Sometimes your best player isn't available and everyone steps up at the same time, and it almost becomes an addition by subtraction. Obviously, we would rather have her there with us, but it just forced other people to step up. So the James Brown Invite's always a good tournament for us because it's super close. It's only an hour drive away from us. We can leave the morning of the tournament, not to get a hotel every night. And they do a great job. And, now, of course, the gentleman that I was an assistant coach under at SFU, he's now the head coach at Morgan State, and Morgan State's the team that hosts the James Brown. So they always do a great job there. Yeah, it's always been fun going to the James Brown Invite, and it's a local tournament that we can have some of our, friends and family and fans come out and watch, which is awesome.
What was it like going to the Red Flash Invitational tournament this year?
Well, this year we didn't. But we did go in previous years. But the last time we went to the Red Flash Invite, we went our first year and we went our second year, and that was also a part of our 3 tournament. The Red Flash Invite was always just before the James Brown Invite. We didn't do it this year because they changed the dates, and the dates didn't work out for us. But going in the past, it was always interesting because, of course, I was at St. Francis before, and St. Francis hosts the Red Flash Invite. So it was a little weird because you were going not only against my old team, but there were still, there were still girls on that team that I coached when I was at St. Francis. So it was a little bit of like a pride thing. Like, I don't want to lose to this team. I want to, you want to beat the team that you always want to beat the team that you left. You always do, whether people admit it or not, you always do. So it was pretty cool going there. And I believe we actually beat St. Francis in the championship match the last time we were there, which was awesome. And that was our first of 3 tournaments in a row that we had won back in 2019-20.
What was it like in 2018 taking that first team to nationals?
Well, 2018-19, we made postseason for NEC championships. We made postseason for USBC sectionals. But that year we came just a little shy of nationals. So the first year we made nationals was 2019-20. That was our second. No, 2019-20 when COVID hit. So 2020-21 was actually our first year we made it, which was last year. I think we would have made it our second year, but we didn't get to go until our third year. And then we made it again this year. So we're on a 2-year streak of making nationals for both NCAA and USBC. But man, I mean, it was awesome. It was awesome. The first year was kind of weird because, even though we bowled last year and we had nationals, COVID was still very strong. Not that it's not now, but it was to the point where we didn't have the vaccines and we had to be so cautious with everything we did. And usually there's like a big banquet at nationals. They do all the ceremonies, and they kind of cut all of that because, we want to see people as less as possible because they don't want to spread the virus. So last year was like just excited that we made it for the first time. But then this year felt kind of like the first time all over again, because we actually got to experience the full thing with the banquets, with all the festivities. So it's kind of like we made it for the first time 2 times in a row. And I just love it for our girls because it's a moment where their hard work pays off. And you think of all the practices in any sport that you don't like to do, whether basketball shooting a crap ton of free throws, or bowling shooting a ton of spares, or, doing all the dirty work. I think when you realize that you make nationals and you get to experience a nationals trip with your team, I think that's just when you kind of realize that all the hard work paid off. And now you get to put your hard work against the best in the country and see where the chips fall. And, last year in our first ever nationals run, we kind of got humbled a little bit. Like, first time we made it, and we've got to play the best teams in the country, and they look like the best teams in the country. And we probably had some nerves our first year making it, but then this year we brought everyone back from last year's team, and we looked super comfortable when we were there, and we bowled really well at nationals this year. So now I think we're a program that expects to make nationals, and when we get there, we're not as timid or as shy as that first year. So I think we're only going to get better for years to come.
What does a typical game day look like for St. Mount Mary's bowling?
Yeah, Mount St. Mary's. For a typical game day, so there's 3 formats in college bowling. 2 styles though. So one is the Baker style, and for Baker play, it's essentially we always bowl 5 at a time, but it's essentially 5 ladies are coming together to make one game. So I'm gonna have someone bowl the first frame, and they're also gonna bowl the 6th frame. I'm gonna have someone bowl the 2nd frame and the 7th frame, so on and so forth. Whoever has your best line or your best look is usually going to be in the 5th frame and the 10th frame, because you want them in at the end of the game when the pressure's on. So that's a Baker game. And then a traditional game is when all 5 bowlers bowl their own game, and those 5 totals combine into one big score of, hopefully 1,000 or better. That means they're all shooting about 200s. Whereas when you do the Baker game, it's all 5 bowlers making up one game, and then you bowl 5 of those games to get your 5-game score. So in each format, you're getting 5 games per match, but how you're getting there is a little bit different. The 3rd format is also Baker play, but it's best of 7. So instead of my total score versus your total score, it's the first team to win 4 games Baker style. So I could beat you by 100 pins. You could beat me by 1 pin next game, but it's not like I'm up by 99 pins. It's a tie 1-1. So those are the 3 formats that exist in college bowling. Usually in a 3-day tournament, you'll do 5 matches Baker style on Friday, 5 matches traditional style on Saturday, and then 3 best of 7 rounds in the bracket on Sunday. But there's tournaments with different varieties. But to keep it as simple as possible, that's kind of what the average day or format looks like for NCAA bowling.
Of course, speaking about obviously having a 3-day tournament, what is that like having a 3-day tournament versus other teams such as field hockey, let's say, you play that day, you win or you lose, and that's it?
Yeah, you have to stay present, I think, because not only do we go 3 days in a row, but we're getting 5 matches per day, 5 games each match, so that's 25 games a day. So it's weird because, like, in other sports, say field hockey, like you said, or basketball, you could be up by a lot or down by a lot at the end of the game, and you could like put substitutions in. You could be like, oh, well, like we're up by 20 points, so we could start to play our bench. In bowling, it's very hard to do that because we have to be ready for the next match. And it's all total pinfall as well for standing. So even if we're winning by 30, 50 pins against one team and going into the last game, well, we still need to keep on collecting all those pins for the overall tournament standings. So it's very tough to find opportunities to play your bench unless someone is struggling, and then of course then you utilize your bench. But if all 5 players in are good for that day, they might be the only 5 that bowl all day. So that's one challenge that it presents. But then I think mentally, you just always have to stay present in terms of, if you get a big win, you can't get cocky. You can't get like too excited, because all of a sudden you don't get an hour break before the next match. You don't get 2 days before your next game. Your next game is literally in 2 more minutes. So, you win a game, you get a little cocky, you can win the next 2, and all of a sudden you had a 3-2 day and you're not feeling that great about yourself. So no matter what happens, you have to be ready. And then on the flip side, you might be having a really bad day, 0-1, now you're 0-2. But mentally, you have to stay positive, because you could let that thing continue to snowball and all of a sudden it's an 0-5 day. So you have to stay present through the good and the bad to make sure that your overall record looks good by the end of the year.
Of course, can you talk about, of course, the culture that you've built for St. Mount Mary's bowling?
Yeah, our culture at Mount St. Mary's, we have adopted something that we call the Mount mindset, trying to do a little play on words there. So we kind of gave each letter of the word Mount its own word that we really try to stress throughout the year. So our M for us is maturity, O for us is open-hearted, U for us is understanding, N for us is no excuses, and T for us is togetherness. And those are the 5 pillars that we really try to tie in to our season. We feel like if we could say after each weekend that we were all of those 5 things, then it's been a pretty pretty good weekend. So that's just scratching the surface, kind of what the culture looks like. But like any culture, there has to be buy-in. I think we're getting better and better at it. It's something that we introduced, the Mount mindset, something we introduced in year 3 during that shortened COVID year. We kind of got to expand on it a little bit more this year. And we have a little bit of a turnover next year because, we're graduating 8 seniors, we're bringing in 5 freshmen. And so next year, it's all about making sure that those freshmen know, this is what we do. This is the framework that we abide by. But those are things that we even talk about from the recruiting meetings. We talk about, hey, if you're going to come here, like, you have to believe in the Mount mindset. If you don't, it's just not going to work out for you. And you're probably not going to be here in 2 years anyway. So why come here? So that's kind of the culture that we've established. And we really feel like when we abide to those principles, we're at our best.
Who are some of the biggest teams that you face in your conference each week?
Yeah, our conference, the NEC, which of course we won't be in the NEC next year because we just switched conferences. We just announced that yesterday to the MAAC. But the conference teams that we've played up to this year are very good. The Northeast Conference is one of the best conferences for college bowling, and we're very, very thankful for our time with them. Duquesne is a top 10 quality team. We're a top 10 quality team. Farley Dickinson is a top 10 quality team. They made it to this is a very simple way to put it. Farley Dickinson placed 5th in our conference this year, but they were a Final Four participant in the country. So our conference is so balanced. Anyone could be anyone, and any one of our teams could also be anyone in the country. I know the typical powerhouse names are Vanderbilt and McKendree, but we beat Vanderbilt this year. We beat McKendree this year. So we're a conference that holds our own against anyone in the country. And it is somewhat unfortunate that we're going to be out of that conference, but there also are going to be new, exciting, to be announced opportunities that await us in the future. But every team in that conference, from Sacred Heart to Duquesne to Farley Dickinson, even some of the teams that aren't ranked per se, St. Francis, Wagner, St. Francis College, they could also beat you on any given day. So Long Island had a really good end of the year. So I would say it's a very balanced conference, it's a very competitive conference, and you could argue it's a top 2 or 3 conference in the country.
What is it like, obviously, getting to play those top teams, like you said, Vanderbilt?
It's an honor to share the floor with them at first, because it's the teams that you heard about growing up. When you grow up in the bowling world, you always hear about Vanderbilt, Nebraska, McKendree. And all you ever want to do is, especially as a coach, if you're at a different school, is build a program that can stand toe to toe with one of those, because that's the cream of the crop. And, really, especially with the way our postseason went this year, I feel like we have the confidence that we belong in the same room as those teams. Whether anyone else believes that, that's up to them. But, it all starts with the belief. And we have a belief here that, I think maybe the first couple times when this program was younger and we played Vanderbilt and McKendree, there was a little bit too much of, I don't know if you want to call it fangirling, or just a little bit too much of like, oh my God, that's Vanderbilt, that's McKendree, like, they're so good. But now it's like, yeah, but we're so good too. And people are saying that about us now. So now when we play them, it's not so much, we're still honored to bowl against them because we respect everything they stand for. But every time that we bowl them, now is an opportunity to show, hey, Mount is just as, if not better than these teams. Why not us? That kind of mentality. So it's interesting to see how our mindset has changed playing those kind of schools in our first 2 years to now these past 2 years. It's more like, no, we want to play them because we want to prove to people that we can beat them, and we have done that time and time again. So I think now we just believe that we're in that same conversation as some of those top schools.
What does the recruitment process look like for those prospective student athletes looking to go to college to play bowling?
The bowling world is, I can only say so much because of NCAA and all, rules and stuff. But, for the bowling recruiting scene, we're a smaller community. We're not like basketball, where there might be like, I feel like if you're a basketball coach and you want to recruit, you have to go to like so many different games each year. And not that we don't travel, we definitely do. But there's some really big events across the country that attract a lot of the top talent all to one central location. So those are the ones as coaches I feel like we tend to target. And it's kind of like everyone's in one location, where no matter how many basketball games there are, you're never going to have everyone in one location because it's always just 2 teams. But because bowling does have this individual component to it, for a lot of people, bowling is an individual sport until they get to college and it takes on this team atmosphere. So when you have these individual tournaments that have, thousands and thousands of the best in the country, from a recruiting perspective, it's really nice because you don't necessarily have to travel far and wide like other sports have to. So that's kind of how we differ from other sports. And then from there, we're just making sure that we're finding athletes. And of course, we have their major. They're doing well in high school. We have, Mount St. Mary's has very high academic standards. So we're making sure that we are bringing in athletes that we feel like can do well here academically. And then of course, there's the athletic piece as well. Are we bringing in people that we think are going to add value to this team that could keep our standards going up each and every year and to continuously raise the bar here.
What are some of the biggest things that you look at in those prospective student athletes when determining if they are fit for Mount St. Mary's?
Well, I think some of the things we just talked about. I think, again, the academic component is huge. This is not I want to say this is an easy school. I think it's a school that if you put the work in, you're going to reap the rewards, but I don't think there's any easy A's given out at Mount St. Mary's. I think you have to earn it here. So I'm looking for effort both on the lanes and off the lanes. And then again, it all ties together, right? We were talking about culture earlier. We're talking about the Mount mindset. So I need to find people that fit that culture. If they don't, then as good of a bowler as you are, there's a lot of good bowlers out there. We need good bowlers that are also good team players that are also going to abide to the Mount mindset. And if they check all those boxes, then from that point, you bring them on to visit and you see if, you let them interact with the team and you see if the fit's mutual. And if it is, then you go from there and you welcome them aboard. It's a very long process, but it's worth it to find the right candidates per se for our team.
What advice would you give those high school athletes looking to become college bowlers?
For anyone that wants to play college sports, especially outside of maybe the basketball and footballs, is, just make sure your academics are straight. I know it's a regret that I have. I was an okay student in high school, but I know I could have. I really turned it on once I got to college. I was a great student in college, great student in grad school, but I didn't really give it my all in high school, and I know that. And I think as a high school athlete, I just didn't have enough people telling me that, hey, like the financial implications of being a good student in high school could not be undermined, because a lot of schools, that have, especially private schools like us, that have academic merit-based scholarships, you want to have good grades because that's more times than not where the majority of your financial aid is coming from, is how great of a student you are academically. And if you're a great student academically, you're going to get some good scholarships regardless of where you go. And you're not relying on the athletic component as much. Obviously, the sports like basketball and football, where a majority of the team is on full rides, and that's great. But the reality is, for almost every other sport that's not football and basketball, that's not the case. And so if you want to really help yourself out in that department, get good grades in high school. That would be my biggest advice.
What advice would you give those future college athletes looking to become professional bowlers?
Well, I know we have a couple on our team that, could probably pan out a professional career. First off, you have to have confidence, I think, because we have some really good bowlers on our team. And sometimes I'm like, so you're going to do some professional events after you leave here? And sometimes they're like, oh, I don't know. Like me? I'm like, yes, you. Like your stats are good enough. You. So making sure that they're confident, and I try my best to keep them confident and talk them up. But you got to own it, because if you're going to go into a professional event and there's any doubt that you don't believe you should be there, then you're going to get wiped to the floor, because that's half the battles. You got to believe, kind of like with us when we're playing those teams like McKendree and Vanderbilt, you have to believe that you belong there, because if you don't believe you belong there, you already lost the match. So same thing with, I would assume same thing individually. You're going to professional events, and if you actually have it in your head already that I don't belong there with these top athletes, if you don't accept yourself as one of those top athletes, what's the point of being there? You're not going to believe in your abilities. So from a mental perspective, that's what I would say. From a physical perspective, in terms of bowling, I think any coach, college, high school, Team USA will say your spare game better be sharp, because the thing is, everyone can strike. Once you get to the college level, anyone could strike. But can you spare? Because bowling is a game of luck sometimes, and there's going to be really good shots that you throw that should have struck, but they're not going to. And if you can't make that second shot, if you get too frustrated from that first shot and can't make your spares, your spare game is not that sharp, then you're going to get killed out there. It's a lot better to go strike, spare, strike, spare, strike, spare, or actually I would say it's better to even go spare the whole entire game than strike open. You could have 5 more strikes than spares and lose that game by 50 pins if you're not sparing. So that's important. Everyone wants to strike. Like in basketball, everyone wants to make the cool 3-pointers. Everyone wants to slam dunk. Just like in basketball, what are the fundamentals? Layups. What are the fundamentals? Dribbling, IQ of the game. We're no different than that. We have fundamentals, and for us, our fundamentals are spare shooting. And if you can't have your fundamentals down, or free throw shooting in basketball, spare shooting in bowling, then you're going to get exposed when you're playing that high of a talent. So that from a physical standpoint, I would stress the spare game. From the mental standpoint, you just have to believe that you belong there. Those are the 2 things that I would recommend to anyone that wants to be a professional athlete. And I think that carries over to sports outside of bowling as well.
What's the one biggest advice you would give future college coaches looking to become either head coaches or even coach in college bowling?
I would say you have to be willing to, it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure from the school. It's a lot of pressure from your own bowlers. It's a lot of pressure from the community. Think about you think about the big sports, like basketball and football. It's like every time they lose a game, everyone is calling for them to be fired, right? It's like they lost. Like coaches are human too. So you can only imagine the mental health that takes on coaches at that high of a level, in basketball and football, that every time they lose, people that they don't even know are calling for them to be fired. They don't know anything about the situation. And even though it's not like that for college bowling and other sports at that high of a level, there still is the pressure of expectations. And you have to understand that every move you make is going to be ridiculed to some extent, or questioned, and just have confidence in your ability to answer those questions. Because no matter what you do as a coach, good or bad, there's going to be people that don't agree. And you have to kind of stick to your guns and believe that through the results that you've achieved, that you're doing the right thing. So stick to your guns and be confident. Kind of just like I said for the athletes, you got to be confident no matter what. Coaches have to be the same way. Be confident in your ability. You kind of have to block out the noise of everyone that says you're doing things wrong. But then also make sure that your players know you care about them. I know every single practice while they're warming up and going through their stretches, I try to make it a point to go around to each athlete individually, just ask, how's their day going? How's your day going? How did classes go today? It's a small question, right? But I think it goes a long way. It kind of gives me a feel as a coach of who's having a bad day, who's having a good day. If they're having a bad day, maybe I'll try to crack a joke or something to make the day a little better. But also if they're having a bad day and they're not bowling that well, maybe I'll try to not be as harsh on them, because I already know maybe the mental health is not in the best spot that day, because whatever things are going on onside, outside the lanes. Something as small as that. I know it's easier with a smaller team like bowling. We only have 11, 13 people. I get it when you have like a football team of 100 people. It's not always easy to do that. Maybe you just say hi to everyone really quick. But even something as small as that, I like to think the athletes appreciate, and it goes a long way.
Where can my listeners find Mount St. Mary's on social media?
Yeah, so we are on pretty much everything. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's all as Mount Bowling. You can search Mount Bowling on Facebook, facebook.com/Mount Bowling. Instagram and Twitter are Mount_Bowling. Facebook is where we really live stream a lot of our matches. Sometimes ESPN does a match or Flow Bowling does a match, but for the most part, you can catch almost all of our matches live streamed on Facebook, and that's helped us get a pretty big following there. Instagram, we're very active on the stories with our team trips. You can kind of follow our trips there, and then Twitter is where we'll actually post the results from each match. So we'll live stream on Facebook, but we don't have, it's all from usually our phones. And then we'll post the actual results on Twitter. So at Mount Bowling, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you can find us on all 3 of those.
Thank you again, Coach Kenneth Degraaf, for your interview, and best of luck in your future with Mount St. Mary's Women's Bowling Program.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate it.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Coach Kenneth Degraaf, for your interview, and best of luck in your future with Mount St. Mary's Bowling.
Thank you.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free